Well, good day, everyone. I hope this finds you doing well and having fun doing whatever it is you may be doing. I have got a sick surprise for you all today. So, as you all know, I love my salsa spearfish, and it has seen me through many of cross-country races. It's seen me on the podium twice in the last year. However, following a wreck about a month ago where I was treating the spearfish like an enduro bike, riding down some steep, rocky, and slick terrain, I ended up losing traction, falling off my bike, and breaking my finger. And now a month later, my finger has healed to some extent, although I have very limited motion in the middle joint of the fifth proximal phalanx there. The proximal joint works, but the middle has a very little range of motion, unfortunately. So what did I do? Well, instead of correcting my shitty skills, I decided to get a bike that would forgive my shitty skills, and so now I give you a bike that is basically like me on peyote, full of love and forgiveness. This is the Salsa Pony Rustler GX1. This is the alloy frame, and let me do a quick bike check. So this is a nearly stock bike with a few little tweaks that I added. So let's go ahead and take a look. So the bike is rocking the aluminum extra large frame with Dave Weigel split pivot suspension. The split pivot suspension is excellent at isolating braking forces, pedaling forces from the bumps on the trail. And so what it does is it allows for a very supple ride where you don't get pedal feedback, and it is similar to the Trek active braking pivot, or the ABP, where you can get a handful of brake and you still have very active rear suspension. So I love the split pivot design. It is 120 millimeters. It's the Fox Float DPS. So it does have the 3 compression settings, and I'm just running it wide open. It is so plush wide open, but it's a great pedaling platform, so it just feels incredible. It's just this plush, incredible feel. It's probably to some extent modulated by the big tires, and I'll get into that. Okay, so that's what we got in the rear. In the front, we're rocking the Fox 34. This is my first experience with a 34, 130 millimeter. This is the Performance Series, and I really like it. It's stiff, it's good support, and I'm still playing around with the sag, getting good pressures and preload and rebound settings, so we'll see how it goes. It's got the Whiskey Parts rims. These rims are set up for 650B plus, and this is rocking the Schwalbe Nobby Nick 27.5 by 3, so this is a full 3-inch plus tire. I'm getting tons of traction with these tires, guys. I cannot begin to tell you how much traction I'm getting with these. I can ride like a complete asshole, and this thing just provides so much traction. I love it. All right, this is rocking the SRAM guide. This is the DB5s, 180 millimeter rotors up front in the back. And one thing I've noticed about the SRAM, and this is my first experience with SRAM brakes, is that they modulate very well, but it feels almost like I'm not getting as much power as, say, the Shimano or the SLX that I'm running on my Kona Process 111. However, I'm still breaking these in, and so there's a break-in period, and we'll see how it goes. But I do like the fact that I can actually modulate these a lot better than the Shimano. So pros and cons there. All right, this is running the SRAM GX shifter. For the rear, there is no front. This is just a 1x11, so we'll go ahead and go through that real quick. So I've got a standard SRAM 1x11 crank. I'm rocking a 30-tooth 11-speed. This is a SRAM 30-tooth crank, so it really allows me to get some good climbing in. This is an 11 to 42 GX1 rear cassette, I believe. This is a GX1 11-speed shifter. I'm used to this because this is what I'm running on my Process as well. So pretty snappy, responsive shifting. And the SRAM shifting is kind of nice that when I downshift, into my higher gears in the back for climbing, I can downshift multiple gears, but when I upshift, it's only one gear at a time, but that's pretty consistent with SRAM. Okay, so the modifications that I have on this bike did not come with a dropper seat post, which is kind of perplexing, and Salsa does have a tendency to do this, where their quote-unquote lower expense models don't come with a dropper, and I don't understand why, because droppers aren't particularly expensive, and even though this is a quote-unquote lower cost bike, it's still a $3,500 bike, and I expect a $3,500 bike to have some sort of dropper. So I went ahead and pulled the dropper off of my Spearfish and put it on this bike. So I'm running a KS Lev Integra 125 millimeter dropper post. This dropper has external routing. That's the way that it comes. However, this frame does have internal routing, so I could easily put an internally routed dropper seat post, but this is just the only one I have. So I pulled that off of the Salsa before I sold it to buy this one here. So that's what I'm rocking, and it works fine. Salsa has a really good cable management system. These little cable hooks here that screw into the frames, really nice. It's all external for the most part, but it's still really nice, really manageable. Okay, so there we go with our basic component setup. As always, I'm running the Raceface Chester flats. Love the Chester flat pedals. Good price, really reliable, really tacky pedal. Your foot sticks to it. The other major modification that I've made to this frame, or to this bike rather, is the stem here. The extra large comes with, I believe, a 100 millimeter stem. Salsa, listen to me. Why would you put a 100 millimeter stem on a bike with enduro sensibilities? I don't know, but Salsa, they just love long stems on their bikes. I'm not entirely sure why, because I really love the short stem, long handlebar kind of concept. It makes for much more predictable steering, and that's just my opinion. However, I imagine that if you are biking in much narrower area where you have lots of close trees, you might actually benefit from having shorter handlebars. But as you can see, where I bike, the trails are fairly open, even when they get technical and off camber, they're still fairly open, so I can afford to do that. Okay, so that's the bike check, that's the rundown. What is my initial impression of this bike? Mind you, I only have about 5 miles on this bike. I'm going to try to put another 10 or 15 miles on tonight. I've brought my torch out, so even as the sun goes down, I should be able to ride, but my initial impression is, love the traction! Love the traction! I have so much traction, I can ride like an asshole. I don't have to concern myself with lines so much, and so it's nice. I could just get on the bike, I can ride it, and it compensates for me being a middle-aged dude that has a shitty skill set. What can I say? But hey, I love it nonetheless, and I will be unapologetic about that. It does not, however, seem to accelerate as quickly as my 29ers. It seems to accelerate slowly, and it doesn't seem to be as poppy and responsive when I quote-unquote hit the gas. And I should say that this does not bob. This is an incredibly efficient suspension design, among one of the most efficient suspension designs. So it may simply just be due to these massive 3-inch diameter tires and the fact that there's a lot of rotational weight on this bike. I should say that while this bike is heavy by some standards, it is not particularly heavy by the kinds of bikes that I'm used to riding. Again, I have a Kona Process 111, and it is almost 34 pounds the way I have it. This bike is a little less than that. It's about 32 pounds. So it's lighter than the Kona, but it doesn't feel like it accelerates as well. However, I have so much traction that I can grind up a pretty steep grade, and actually I had to do a pretty significant climb to get up to where I'm at right now. So it's a trade-off. It doesn't accelerate, but I have so much traction that I can just grind up pretty slick, steep climbs. And if anybody knows what the riding is like in southern New Mexico, the trails are not purpose-built for mountain biking for the most part, so they tend to be fairly slick, fairly off-camber, sandy in spots, and so they tend to present with very challenging terrain that lends itself real nicely to the Plus tires. So that's my initial impression of this bike. I absolutely love the traction. I love the way that the suspension feels. It's so plush, and I can run my compression wide open and not have to worry about bobbing, and I can just grind up the climbs, and when it goes downhill, it feels fun. I know some people can have stated, and they're certainly right, within their rights to do this, but they have stated that some of these Plus bikes have a quote-unquote dumbed down sort of feel to them. I don't necessarily feel that way. I believe that if I was a highly experienced mountain biker and I had a really technical toolbox, this bike may feel dumbed down, but with only a couple of years of solid mountain biking experience under my belt, so to speak, and a fairly limited toolbox to some extent, I feel I'm not necessarily the rider that some people are that have decades of riding experience. I feel that this bike gives me the confidence to go out there and gives me the confidence to do things that some of these more experienced riders are doing with more conventional bikes. In addition to that, this is a solid frame, solid tires, and a solid setup, and I can't wait to get some bike packing done with this bike because I think it'll be great. It's a pity I didn't have this bike on my last peyote experience. It would have been great on some of the kind of the uncharted ATV trails that were full of sand that I ended up having to negotiate. I can't wait to take this on that. So just having a hell of a good time so far. Okay, guys, I hope that you're having as good a time as I am. This is my initial impression of the Salsa Pony Rustler GX1 aluminum frame. This is the extra large size. All right, we'll see you in the next video, and be on the lookout in the upcoming months for a full review of this bike, and I'll try to get some good footage of this bike going through terrain as well. All right, take care, guys.